done for me lately? It's coons. What have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them.
Hey, good evening. Welcome to Let's Talk 2. And tonight we have Professor Dre here, who everyone must know, great friend of mine. And sometimes we don't understand that we need to get our friends to really, definitely when they have a specific skill set, to really be able to give us some information and shed light on issues that affect Black Americans. So many times we or get caught up in the day-to-day hustle of life and deal with what we deal with, taking care of ourselves, providing for our families, and understanding that for Black Americans, and I'm gonna use our brother Hoshimad's favorite statement when he speaks about our people. He says nothing is wrong with Black people, something happened to Black people. And understanding some of the atrocities, trauma that was passed down generation to generation for Black Americans. And a lot of times in cases, Black Americans, they're normal, or what they perceive to be normal far as how they live is really a very, very dysfunctional situation that they have allowed themselves to actually make it work. We are people that make shit happen. We're resilient. We're what we have went through out of anybody in the diaspora. And I'm gonna play some videos, not tonight, but going forward, and really understanding historically what we have went through out of anybody in the diaspora is truly remarkable. And we need to really understand that as Black Americans, we are different. Not that we're not saying we're better than anybody else, but we're different. To go from chattel slavery to Reconstruction to Jim Crow, to housing, the prison industrial complex, to supporting political parties, to starting one political party, another political party being treating us with benign neglect. And one of the issues is being shut out of the healthcare with adequate healthcare. And I was thinking about this conversation and having a conversation about mental health because I had noticed over the past few years that a lot of mental health facilities throughout the country have basically closed down. So where are the people who have to deal with mental health? Where are the Black Americans who have to deal with mental health? And a lot of times we have mental health issues that are very untreated. So we need to understand that when we see certain characteristics or identifiers within ourselves, like, oh, maybe I need to go get some help, talk to someone. And it doesn't even have to be anything major where you are quote unquote suicidal. It may just be from some trauma, some childhood trauma, something may have happened to you, and so forth and so on. So tonight we have Professor Dre here, and this is something that she's passionate about. She's very instrumental in getting people and getting particularly black women to understand who they are. Black women to step into their greatness. You don't have to be ratchet to be heard. You don't have to be ratchet to be seen. And understanding that you are the mother of civilization. So, what's up, Dre?
What's up, Q? What's up, everyone? Hopefully, y'all can hear me. So, as you all probably seen me a million times on this platform, and I'm so thankful to be back. And Q had to push me because this is one of my subject matter expertise. I have my bachelor's and master's in social work. Spent a over a decade as a practicing social worker. Now I had transitioned into um, as a professor and still dibble and dabble with mental health, especially in the Black community. Because I don't want that skill set to go away, and I want to help as many people as I can, whether it's family members, whether it's friends, or whether it's just a stranger, to identify the triggers and the traumas that they're going through. So I decided to put a PowerPoint together because when I was going through this and was asked to do this topic, so many people just think mental health is just this new um, topic of discussion, the hot topic, but it's not. It's been around since. Think about it. Our ancestors had even came, was brought here violently to this continent, to this country. So we're gonna dive deep into how even black labor and black mental health back in the 1600s was even pigeonholing us also to a moneymaker way back then. And when you all see the history, because I like to start with history because I know it's boring for some people, but it also tells the story of how we got here presently and how the cycle is perpetuated and it's also still continuing because people lack the knowledge, right? It's like, the people perish because of lack of knowledge. So I want to shed some light into mental health and I just broke it off into like part one, just like the really nitty gritty of the history. Then part two, we'll talk about more social work because so many people I have known, and even when I decided to be a social worker, the stigma is y'all take people's kids away, y'all do this, but it's so broad, and it's still not enough black folks that are social workers. And when we get into the higher education piece, the numbers even dwindle down. So that's why I be shocking sometimes to my students because I teach at a PWI. They're like, you're the professor. Hold on, you're the first black prof, and I had half students tell me like you're the first black teacher professor I ever had in my life. So they get a different flavor from the perspective of not just a black woman, but just a black person, and some of them probably never interacted with a black person as closely as they have, by me being the professor in the classroom. So we'll go ahead and get started.
Let me ask you, Drea, just for the sake of conversation, and I don't know if all the audience understand, could you just give them a background of you, where your family's from,
Okay.
where you went to college at, and explain how that tied in with the historical aspect of being a Black American?
Definitely. So I am originally from Boston, Massachusetts, Mattapan to be exact. So y'all can look up Mattapan, and I got to give a brief history of Mattapan. So the neighborhood that I'm from in Boston is pretty much predominantly African American and Caribbean. So when my parents moved to Boston in 1970, pretty much they moved to Roxbury, which is the epicenter of Boston, of Black America. But when they bought their home in Mattapan, where I grew up at, it's pretty much Black American Caribbean folks. So I grew up in that, diaspora of my neighbors, being two-parent households, whether they're African American from the South or Haitian, Jamaican, or Nigerian. So I grew up in that type of environment, right? So I decided at a young age, I right up from slavery, my sophomore year, but traveling from Boston to Alabama. So my parents are from Atmore, Alabama. So that's Escambia County, 50 miles outside of Mobile, if anyone been to South Alabama. So, my family is pretty much southern as they can get. So spent, like I said, summers in Alabama, hence why I decided to go to HBCU. So every year, twice a year, We used to drive by this amazing historic sign that said, at the time it was Tuskegee Institute, and I was like, I'm going to my school. My parents looking at me like this 6 year. I was 6 years old at the time when I kept saying I'm gonna go to this school. And so when I went read up from slavery, I said, solid. I'm going there. I don't care what other schools are up here. My parents begged and pleaded me like, why you want to go to school in the South? I had to pick a school in which I had family close by. Um, so I actually applied to Bethune Cookman. That was like second on my list, and I wanted to go to Hampton. And I was like, no, I always want to go to Tuskegee. So I have my bachelor's of science. So I'm a social scientist by profession, by my degree, my expertise, my bachelor's in science and social work. And I went deeper to the South, and y'all gonna be clutching your pearls. I actually got my master's of social work from the University of Southern Mississippi in Hattiesburg. So I went from an HBCU to a PWI, and we could have a whole discussion about that later on, which was different experiences, but it was kind of one of the same. And I'm glad I went to a HBCU first because it not only taught me about my blackness, I already knew about my blackness because my parents, once again, they went to segregated schools their whole life. And you all can look at Rosenwald schools. So if anybody's parents are from the South and they went to segregated schools before 1970, it's called Rosenwald, and Julius Rosenwald had a collaboration with Booker T. Washington. So I always tell my parents, like, look at the connection we have with Tuskegee. So he funded every black school. Him and Booker T. Washington funded every black school in the South for black children to have an education. So if it wasn't for Julius Rosenwald, which was also part owner of Sears, the headquarters in Chicago, he was a Jewish man, partnering with Booker T. Washington. None of our parents who are from the South who graduated from 1970 and beyond and before that wouldn't have education if it wasn't for that collaboration. So, anytime you hear about like a training school, that was for the black children of the South to go to. And my parents went to Escambia County Training School, graduated from there. My mom's class, the 1970 class was the last class. Then they went, you always hear across the tracks when they integrated. So that's why I like to start off with history. And I'm such a history buff because, especially Black history, because we don't know enough about our history. We just think, oh, like the South is slow or the up North is, and, is more superior. When you look at the history and you look at why people had to do northern migration, you'll understand why that was a reason for that. You understand why it's a reason for mental health being still being barriers to us, and also too, you have to understand where you came from. Like my actual lineage came from Sullivan Island in South Carolina, which is in Charleston. My mom and I had the privilege of going there, and at least one of our ancestors, 90% of one of our ancestors came from Sullivan Island. And so people don't even know that history. So, like I said, when I found that out, and I was talking more about it, we actually took a trip there. So that's my lineage that I did the research on. My parents told me about. Also, we also sprinkle in, and I know it's true for me, that you have that indigenous blood. I do have indigenous blood as well because where my parents are from in South Alabama, all that once upon a time was not only enslaved people but also indigenous to the Creek Indians. So, from that point on, and even parts of Georgia, parts of Alabama that I live at, all this was Creek Indian as well. And you just have different tribes of Creek Indian. So down there it's Porch Indian, Porch Creek Indian. So that's why it's always good for everyone to do your research and not just go by what's. I understand TikTok have dope stuff, social media have dope stuff, but do your own research for your people as well.
So before we get into the meat and potatoes of our discussion, and I know even talking about it and understanding you were going to your mother and father's home state, Alabama, and you read Booker T. Washington's monumental book, Up from Slavery. And this book had a profound effect on your life, on understanding who you were, giving you sometimes your history, your family history, passed down from generation to generation from conversation, but now you have a figure who you were able to identify with, and realizing his popularity and his viewpoint towards education and what happened to us trying to push us forward. Let me ask you, and then one of the other things, I know how you feel about reparations and understanding that reparations should not just be money, should be access to health and mental health in particular. So let me ask you, after reading this book and then deciding, okay, I'm going to Tuskegee University, and in your experiences, it wasn't a culture shock for you because this is something that you prepped and planned for. See, because a lot of people when they go to HBCUs and they start learning history, it's like, oh, this was who we were. They it's a culture shock. They come from different areas throughout the country or throughout the world, and they never really understood or get a glimpse of the Black American experience. Yours was not more a culture shock. Yours was, now I'm going to be able to take a deep dive and be amongst peers like me, people who look, think, talk like me, and we're going to be able to identify some things about our history that we probably didn't know. How was that on? Because when we talk about mental health, sometimes people don't know that that's learning certain things is a shock to your system. And a lot of times we learn things about us and we get angry because we be like, yo, really, we was cattle. Like they treated us like cattle. They buck broke a lot of the men. Like, and you be so angry, and then you're not able to um get rid of that anger. So explain that, and then you could go into. I know you got some stuff here that you want to a synopsis of sort on what you want to discuss tonight. Explain that because I know you've seen it with some of your peers. It's a culture shock for a lot of people. A lot of people go to HBCUs and they get so caught up with the HBCU life, they never go back to what they consider reality prior to coming to college.
Right, exactly. And I like that question because coming from Boston, my high school, I went to a math and science high school. So my high school and HBCU experience totally different. Majority of my classmates in high school was Vietnamese. So you talk about culture shock. I felt, we had black folks, we had a diverse high school, so shout out to that. But going from that to an HBCU, I'm looking at traditionalism, pageantry, black folks coming from different areas of the United States and even international students in a way, I was like, oh, this is cool, but I still was grounded because I'm thankful for my parents because I felt like I've been surrounded by black folks my whole life. My parents take my siblings to the South. We still connected to our roots because I know some people. I have people in my family. They'll move from Alabama up north somewhere and never come back to the South. So I'm thankful my parents. We drove down twice a year to stay connected to our Southern roots. So I didn't have much of a culture shock. I had a culture shock when I'm like, yo, these people just be talking to you like, hey, hey, hey. I was like, wait, because Boston, we ain't doing all this. Hey, how you doing? Now I'm used to speaking to folks, but all this you waving at folks, like where they from? So I also too stayed grounded with who I was as who I am as a black woman. But I grew into my womanhood, and I think people have this veil, and it's so funny I mentioned veil because you got the lifting the veil of ignorance statue on campus of like I'm black and is all black excellence. No, you still have black dysfunction. You still have your family members who are not highly educated, whatever that means, but they may have a knowledge of the education. So I didn't get caught up with, oh, I'm a elitism because to be honest with y'all, here in Alabama and other places, I tell people I graduated from Tuskegee, these people act like you a celebrity because of the history of Tuskegee. But I don't let that go to my head because yes, it was a privilege to get into Tuskegee because of not the acceptance rate is very tough. The competitive is very tough. I went to school with a lot of amazing people who did and still doing dope stuff, but I don't let it get to my head because I want to keep that door open for younger people to see that it's not about black excellence. It's about once again, Booker T. Washington was all about how do we lift the bill of ignorance to everybody because whether you got money or not or notoriety, we still have some type of ignorance to us. And how are we going to pass the baton on and pretty much lift the veil of ignorance so we can not only just have money, but also have industry, and us being in the forefront of this industry, and not industry like entertainment, but other things we can do. So it's just really staying grounded, and also just tapping into, once again, how I was raised and my values and my beliefs that I held on to, that it didn't make me, like I said, elitism, or like, yeah, I graduated from Tuskegee and what. Because, sometimes I did kind of get hardy and I had to have my humbling moments. And I also, too, have to always praise the bridge, my parents, my ancestors, because I'm the first generation, to be honest, I'm the first person in my family to go to college. And so I really broke a lot of cycles. And like my cousins now who's going to college, they're doing dope things. I joke with them and say I'm the blueprint, but at the same time too, y'all gotta stay humble and y'all keep opening the doors. Don't just think, oh, because I have my degree, I'm better than anybody in this family. You're not. It's just a piece of paper you worked hard for, and I always say I completed my 130 credit hours. um, and also too, I paid my dues. So I always praise, like I said, my parents, when I moved to on campus, my uncles, everybody who really had a hand in raising me. The degree is not only for me, it's for them. It's for like my great grandparents who didn't have education. My great grandmother got married at 14 years old, but they left us land. Like if my cousins and them built, their house and stuff on the land. So I praise that. Those people who could not go to school. My grandmother on my mom's side had, limited education. My grandmother on my dad's side. So I praise them because they helped me to become the woman that I am. And my parents always said, when you get in a position to help people, you need to help people. You need to share knowledge. So that's why I share a lot of knowledge, whether people want to hear it or not. Sometimes I gotta get pushed to share the knowledge too, because I have so many things that I have within me and so many experiences. Because if I read about slavery, if I read about reparations, I want to go there and see it myself. I don't want to just read about it and research about it. I'm going there because I want to feel that energy of the land, and how as a people we still here after all these atrocities. So yeah.
It's amazing when you think about that. We're two people who believe in reparations, who call themselves reparationists, and then when you hear some of the criticisms that people have about Booker T, it's like, oh, he would be somebody that would not be for reparations, but in all actuality, if you really understand his work, you really understand what he was saying. He was somebody that was like, okay, yeah, we deserve, we're owed reparations, but in the meantime, we need to do other things and we need to do this. And he really, really thought that and believed that education and being educated and having the knowledge, having information to be able to do for self. And that's one of the biggest issues that I think that a lot of times we have going on in this country is we are do for self. We are people, like I said, we are resilient. And I think that we are so resilient that we don't even really give ourselves credit. And then like we become the face. We become, and I know we discussed this before. How the hell we the face of DEI? I know as a black man, if I was to say to you and a few other women who I consider myself close to that you guys were a DEI hire, you guys would go off on me. You guys would that's offensive. I believe to ever say that the black women that I know were DEI hires, knowing the sacrifices that they made to get the education, to be able to put themselves in position to get that job. And because DEI and certain things have become so political, we've taken it so far out of context of what it is because now it's a political argument instead of being able to get the reparative justice within the confines of these specific people, Black Americans, was done an injustice. And they need to make it whole. The system, the country was so against this particular, it was basically a genocide. and they never made it whole and they never got repaired. Repair never was done. So with that, like when you think about um us today and you look at us, our condition, and you see how we are, right, wrong, or indifferent, what, how do you tie our condition today and the issue in the relationship with mental health? They try to say black men don't have conversations, black women don't take no accountability. They don't. They're not. They don't hold each other accountable. Um, when we hold black women accountable in public, they say things like, "Oh, y'all don't know how to protect black women." They bring the statement of Malcolm up, talking about the black woman is the most least protected woman, and all this stuff that we go through throughout our day. How certain things have made us in position to look at black men and black women as like bitter enemies.
Hmm.
Social media tell you that black men and black women hate each other. Like I said, social media tell you that. But the reality is that that black man came from a black
Okay.
man and vice versa. So let's talk about mental health in the relationship that black Americans have with mental health.
Well, it goes back to what I mentioned. There's so many different barriers to mental health. But now, from the time when I was in school, and you talk about, I graduated from Tuskegee 2006, went to grad school 2007, got my MSW 2009. The world have changed so much, and mental health have changed, and now we have more accessibility to mental health, right? This is, I'm gonna say it is. People can get upset. People don't want to change. You know what it takes to change? It takes a lot of work. Number one, it takes you to understand you got to have self awareness to say, I am problematic too, right? And so many times when we see these folks, we going back and forth on social media because no one don't want to admit that not only am I the problem too, but this is also systemic. We also have not seen this married. We have not seen healthy. We have seen healthy relationships married, but see, it's all about. But they don't got money though. It's not about they don't have money or fame, you know. And also, we could take it all the way back to we're like always in this mania state. So I can imagine people's. And I know people joke about this, but this is facts. I can imagine people's nervous systems are dysregulated because there's so much beef between us as people. And I'm like, where did this happen? Because I feel like it started and it exacerbated during COVID. And you know, because people is going through, you know, divorces, breakup, and all this other stuff, and no one don't want to be held accountable because oh, I gotta one up this person, I gotta say they the problem. You know, I don't want to be held accountable. To be honest with you, people don't want to be held accountable, period, because they feel they do not have a problem. And if I just go ahead and project it onto someone else, that means the issue is now on that person, and they have to also do the emotional labor 2 times. So people do not want to admit that they have a problem. Number one. Number two, people talk about there's not enough safe space. There are safe spaces, but once again, there's so people don't want to do research on self. See, it takes a lot of courage to go within and say, you know what? These are some things that's holding me back from this life I truly want to live. And I think a lot of times it's the fear of success. Never mind fear of failure. It's the fear of success. So if I start working on myself and really having this self awareness and really upping my self esteem, and then once I get that up and realize I have an issue and I need to go see you know, a psychiatrist, a social worker, or whoever that's clinical that can really help me through some talk therapy or narrative therapy or whatever therapy, yo, we will be so beyond these conversations. But these conversations are so dysfunctional because once again, it's institutionalized. It's all the way back to the first mental health disorder that was placed on black people, which is called drapetomania, which was a disease in which people were trying to free themselves from slavery And the slave owner was saying they have a mental health disorder because yeah, I'm whipping them every day. I'm making them work 18 hours a day. Why they wanna run away? Now we're gonna put a label on them. That's the first mental health disorder for black people, right? And so think about that. You going through all this labor. You don't got time to think about men. This is dysfunctional. Those ones who did have the courage to say this is dysfunctional, what they do, they get placed with a mental health disorder. Let me shut up now because now I got placed with this disorder. They may do a lobotomy on my mind now, to see why am I so sick? Because I want to get out these conditions. And what do we see now? We see people perpetuate this in 2025 on social media. People saying about SNAP benefits, and that'll be part two. Oh, y'all got it. Oh, now y'all gonna have to sell the box for $25, whatever, because y'all got Snap taken away. And so it's just
We became the face of Snap, which I find, and I know that you going back home to Alabama and living where I live at. Even when you leave your area in Alabama, we see the reality of SNAP recipients. And
exactly.
it's like, why do we want to be the face? And with all due respect, I grew up on it, so I'm not going to sit here and point my finger at anybody who needs assistance, any family who needs assistance to feed themselves. But we're so caught up with being dysfunctional that we allow ourselves to be the face of that. And what,
Yeah,
like I said, so it could be stereotyped to be
exactly.
a bad thing. And it's interesting, like Brother Juan said, like, sometimes we have to avoid and step over them when they're in this dysfunction. And you bring up um being in that slavery situation and thinking that it's normal. And when they started rebelling, like these people really threw, okay, since y'all want to rebel, we can beat you, we can whip you, we can kill you. But we're also going to classify you and say something's wrong with you
Right.
because we feeding, clothing you, raping you. You should be happy
Mhm.
because they basically looked at Black Americans as subhuman.
Right. Exactly. And th- that was actually a diagnosis that was just, I would say, within 1900 that was taken out of the DSM. So the DSM is by the American Psychological Association. This is like the diagnosis Bible in which any type of disorder you may have been clinically diagnosed with, they open up this. I had to take an assessment class and it's like five different axes. Like you got personality disorders that they actually look at and say, okay, you have this diagnosis along with this one, right? So once again, depends on how you look at it, that disorder can definitely, you can either chemically happening, biochemical, you could have got it through trauma, you could have got it through different segments. So that was one of the first diagnoses, drapomania, to say, oh, look it, they they want to run away from slavery. That's not normal. Any of us in 2025 will be like, yo, look at people now. They trying to get out their conditions by any means necessary because they got a family to feed. They got to feed themselves. And then we over here still talking about, oh, I don't want to have accessibility to mental health. And majority of our people are misdiagnosed or undiagnosed because of, once again, we don't want to go do the help. I even made it my mission. I know this is gonna sound really harsh. I don't want to be friends with, I don't want to marry anybody who refuses to go get help. Because if I'm over here doing the work on myself and this is part of my profession, I made that commitment to myself this year and it took me so long. I don't want to be involved with anybody, friendship, kinship, relationship, if you choose not to do the work on yourself. Because how dare I continuously doing the work. I'm not doing the work for me and you. I can only do my work. I can only carry my own burden. So if I got to like not rock with you because you don't want to do your work, I will do so. And it's not harsh, it's self preservation because there's so many people who want to party and BLs because they are self diagnosing themselves. They are, excuse me, self medicating themselves because you see people, I'm out here at the club and I'm ain't nothing wrong with having a good time, but I'm not entertaining you because you want to continue to escape from the actual reality that you have, whether that's a mental health undiagnosed or you escaping your condition. Either way, it's still an escapism, and you refuse to look in the mirror. And after we have all these resources, I don't care if we only have five black folks who is therapists. At least find someone. It don't have to be someone that look like you. Yeah, you want someone that looks like you, but doesn't mean that they have the same background as you because they may came from suburban America and you came from like the hood somewhere, and you want someone to relate. They still have a code of ethics to go by. So you want to see if someone's ethical, you want to see if someone's professional, and also do they have experience that's going to touch you, that's going to reach you to where you are hurting. And a lot of times when we escaping, we're actually hurting. We actually saying, hey, we need help. But if you surround yourself by people like, yo, go ahead, we all partying and BSing, you need to find another environment because you can't keep going to the same environment that's getting you sick.
So I know that you've brought up DSM, right? And I know your exposure to DSM, and this is very important for us to try to get to understand our relationship with mental health, knowing that the curriculum, the Bible that they use to diagnose mental health is at the time was culturally biased. You had a lot of stuff dealing with eugenics, society stuff was in there, and feeling that when they first comprised with this curriculum or this diagnosis book, they felt as though that, like I said, that black people were subhuman when it came to the mind, when it came to our thinking patterns, and so forth, so on. So then we have that we have to deal with. Then we have the access, like you said, of black mental health physicians, where you want to go there, you want somebody who not only just looks like you, who understands what you've been through. I know at the end of the day, I know how you think. We're from the soil. And when we talk about issues of mental health, I think most people don't really get it. And this is why you even see it so much so in what's going on now with everybody de-alienating themselves from other people in the diaspora, because people in the diaspora that have came over here and done whatever they did, they have gotten to a point where they don't understand the work that was put in prior to them getting here. And they're being negligent, like, hold up, like, you doing this, and third. Do you realize what Black Americans went through?
Right.
For you to be able to get what you got to pay some type of homage. You got to understand that it was some sweat, some ass equity put in to you getting the perks that you got. And I know that, not to go to another topic, but this is why a lot of people were offended when this New York City mayor said what he said about immigration and city of immigrants built New York City, so because he was negligent of the Black Americans who built New York City, particularly Wall Street and Seneca Village, which is
Hmm.
central. Um, you could proceed now.
No, you made a good point about
I know you
that.
really wanted to get us to understand some of the framework of mental
Yes. You want me to share my slides?
health.
Are
You
you good?
share it, sure, right? Yeah, there we go.
So, we kind of talked about this. So, this is a picture. I just want everyone, if you ever come to Alabama, this when I went back to Equity Justice Institute, EJI, was founded by Brian Stevenson. Please go here. Like you can even contact me. I will meet you there. So this is they added so many different things, and we can talk about this at another. time. But this is one of the statues that they were saying homage to the Alabama River, which is one of the, the largest river in Alabama that brought, our people here. And this is in Montgomery. So just wanted to show y'all that. But so we talked about like drapetomania, and like I said, 1851. So this is the physician who said, "Hey, y'all want to run from slavery? Y'all have a disease, right?" And so um, of course, you gotta state the sources, so you can always look this up. But he was out of Louisiana, and as you all may or may not know, Louisiana had, I want to say, the most plantations, in the United States, and they have the famous one, which I have to go visit, the Whitney Plantation, in which they pretty much just restored that plantation. So out of Louisiana, he's like, wait, like y'all fleeing, you have a mental health issue. So I just wanted to show this one, and let me get to this. So this is another diagnosis, and it's called pseudoscience. They finally recognized that, of course, these labels that was labeled on slaves had a deep racist history, which we know. So, think about what was going on in 1851. Like our people were still enslaved, our ancestors still enslaved, and like I was talking about the lobotomy, like it's something wrong with y'all. So we always see this photo here. It's always one of the most photographic photo because of you. Like I just mentioned, you working 18 hours, you're getting whipped for, let's say, you wiping your brow, and then you're gonna get gaslighted and say, well, what's wrong with you? You got drapomania because you want to run away from slavery. So always keep that in the forefront of your mind when you're like, oh, it's something wrong with me. And I remember one of my colleagues had sent me a video last night, and the lady was saying, I think she was a mental health physician, and she was talking about, yeah, you would have depression or anxiety if you always have to code switch. So I try my hardest not to code switch. Like, you're gonna get this Bostonian accent, you're gonna get this fro, tomorrow I may come in with straight hair, because you do have that identity disorder at this point now when you're constantly code switching, you don't know who you are. So think about this. Let's go back to what I just taught you all about drapomania. So now, instead of me wanting to run away, I got beat so many times. I don't want to have this label on me. Now I have to comply. So now I got a code switch to appease my master. So it's no difference than 2025. I have to comply because now, everything is on the line. So now I have to code switch. Then in between that, you do lose out on your identity of who you are as a person, right? Um, and as I mentioned, APA just recently, look at that, y'all, 2021, during COVID, issue an apology of the history of racism. So once again, it's always been racist. So this is another barrier that people don't know about, and why people may say, well, I don't trust the mental health system because it had carried on all these different negative connotations when it came to our ancestors and even down to us. But don't let that stop you from getting the assistance that you need. And as it says here, one of the founding fathers of psychiatric, has described it as negrotude. The only cure was to become white. So it was even a mental disorder.
Say
Once
that
again,
again.
so the father of American psychiatric, Dr. Rush, he said black people suffer from an infliction called negrotude. Okay? Because we were just too black. And the only way we was gonna get cured from negrotude was to become white. How are we gonna become white when we've been biologically by the most high
The white ice
created?
cold.
Right. So this is why, to me, this is y'all friendly home girl. This is why you shouldn't code switch, because even if you code switch, you send your kids to these boarding schools, to these predominantly PWI. That's not going to cure you from being black. Okay, so this is has been said. If you do all these things, let me magically turn white. That's not going to happen. So I just wanted to show y'all this. Let's go into this too. So this is, like I said, history is it's important to know where we came from and where we're at, and to say, have we really, quote unquote, um hit the mark of like just even healing as a people or even starting to heal. I don't think we even ripped our band-aid off yet. So in 2015, 80% of psychiatrists or psychologists were white, 4% Black American. I can name about 10 people I went to undergrad school with, grad school with. Shout out to them that are psychologists. My freshman year roommate, she's a psychologist. That's one of her passion and purpose. She always knew what she wanted to do, and she's doing that now. Um, 2019, 83% of white people and 17% of, I don't like minorities, combined are all, psychologists. Listen to this. This is where we need the most people at because with psychiatrists, they're the ones who's actually prescribing the medication to you, right? And it's only less than 2% of Black folks that are psychiatrists. So this is why, because you got to go to medical school too. I don't think a lot of people understand that. When you are a psychiatrist, you have to also go to medical school. You have to apply to medical school. You also got to be accepted. You're getting pretty much the same medical training as a doctor. You are a doctor as well, but you're more focusing on the mind. So this is where we need a lot of our folks to go into. And I understand STEM is a big thing, AI is a big thing, but we still need our folks to be in the spaces which they are actually diagnosing folks and prescribing the medication. And also just don't take any medication because you'll hear people say, well, I got, prescribed this medication. I'm feeling funny, maybe because they gave you a higher doses. And we could talk about that too. Um, 2023. So this one here, I knew about it. It's still seeing the numbers like we always hear about like black girl therapy, black girl this, black girl that. Only 4% of us are in our therapists. So as long as you have like social workers a therapist, as long as your license like the LCSW level, you can be a therapist. A lot of people go into private practice because allegedly that's where the money's at. Just because you go into therapy, I had a conversation with a colleague today, does not mean you're going to be effective or efficient because there's so many people that's unethical as therapists, not trying to sway anyone, but you can also interview your therapist as well. I have friends who have therapists who are different ethnicities and culture and have got amazing results. I just feel as though when you go to therapy and as someone who used to be a active therapist and someone who goes to therapy, it's all about interviewing them. You know what be honest with what they said, be honest with the people on the couch too. Like, what is your issue? Interview them to see what do they specialize in. Everyone is not going to be great at CBT, which is cognitive behavior therapy. That's talk therapy. You always hear about people saying, "Oh, I go to talk therapy." Some people may need narrative therapy, in which they actually like. I do a lot of narrative therapy, in which I do a lot of journaling, so I can get that story. Because you know how you got some people who always want to tell you that victimization story. They probably need to go to narrative therapy to write it out a few times, talk it out, and just to really release that. Um, you got art therapy, you got pet therapy, you have so many different therapy. You just have to find the modality that works for you because sometimes talk therapy is not always going to work for folks, right? Um, and in 2024, last year, this is my field, 22% of social workers are black. I remember telling somebody, I said, actually, at least like 70% of social work is white. And people say, of course, if they're from like a black city, when I'm saying a majority of black folks live in that city, they're like, I've never seen, like a white social worker. But being in this field, the numbers are very slim, especially I teach out of PWI. I can count the number of black students I have had since teaching out of PWI, and it's been going on now 4 years because I was adjunct before I went full time into a PWI. The numbers are slim. So that's why it's important to know the differences. Like I said, psychologists, those are the ones who's going to provide, and clinical social workers, the testing, whether if you or not you have a neurodivergent, I'm pretty sure y'all seeing that name come around, which is ADHD, ADD, autism. So they're the ones who's going to test you. The clinical social workers and the psychologist. If you really need that chemical balance, they're going to now refer you to a psychologist, psychiatric medicine. So they're going to provide the medication for you. Now, licensed independent clinical social workers, they can also prescribe medication too. So just want to tell you all the difference so you'll hear people get it mixed up. So when you're actually going to a talk therapist, you're going to folks who are actually trained in clinical psychology, clinical social work. Okay. You're going to a psychiatrist, they're prescribing you the medication. Because some of our people don't even know that. They don't know the difference. They're like, oh, I'm going to a psychiatrist for therapy. You're going for your medication and to get adjusted. Um, this is just some key takeaways for everybody. So people always talk about, oh, therapy is expensive. No, if you have a full time job, if you have medical insurance, you can actually get therapy through your employee assistance program. It could be 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, and they have folks who are licensed therapists to help you with any issue that you may have. So whether you have a gambling addiction, all the way down to if you're going through, let's say grief, you need a grief counselor. They're there to support you. Just go through your insurance. And I know insurance is such a big thing now because of just with government shutdown, and we're not going to get into that. But you have 988. That is, you can text now for this is that suicidal ideation. They'll text back so you can, get the assistance that you need. You got Black Mental Health Alliance. So this is, like a directory in which, if you like, hey, I want to have a specific Black therapist, you can go here and can find them. And also to NAMI, which is a national alliance on mental health illness. Now they have them all over United States, and not just for you, but let's say you have a severe mental health issue, even your family can go for like group therapy to how do you even cope with someone in your loved one and your family that's going through mental health crises as well. So like I said, yes, as Black people, we have been diagnosed with the unfortunate drapetomania, but at the same time, it's important to get the assistance that we need because yes, we're resilient, but also to here we need help here, and we need help in our environment, which is our bodies. We need help, with our families, and just even the environment, the conditions that we live in. And I think so many times people just think, oh, I just need mental health. Like I said, you're gonna also have to do the work of changing the people you surround yourself with. You also gonna have to be held accountable, not just the women don't want to be. Everybody need to be held accountable because if you want to do better, you're gonna have to really do that work. And then also too, it's okay if you gotta take medication. Like I want to talk about that a little bit. If you have to take medication to stabilize the imbalances, that's okay. And also, don't just take the medication. If you gotta go do, if you gotta exercise, if you gotta walk, if you gotta pray, because I know our folks we love to pray. Thank you, Jesus. But you can also combine your spirituality with therapy. And I'm glad that's being put in the forefront too, because when I was in school, that was a big no-no. Like when I was training as a social worker, it was like you do not talk about religion and mental health. Like those things were separate. But now I'm glad to see that they're integrating both things. People do rely on their spirituality to get them through, challenging times. So, we wanted to talk about, Black mental health. So that's why I would say the conditioning and go and get the assistance that you need. But don't just say, well, I went to go sit on the couch and it didn't work for me. Don't go and lie. Pour everything you got to that person. And if that therapist saying, this is some things I need you to work on it. And if you got to have boundaries and cut off people, that's okay. Because if that person keep making you sick or they keep triggering you, why are you gonna keep going around that person? Um, and that's something that you have to work on. So it's a lot of layers to mental health, and collectively we need it. Individually we need mental health assistance, but only few and far in between have the courage and the boldness to say, hey,
we tend,
assistance.
we tend to think that crashing out, the young the young YNs, the shiesties. We tend to think, and we see this behavior on social media, and it makes a lot of us feel uncomfortable. A lot of us can identify because we maybe used to be that crazy.
Mhm.
But instead of saying, that person needs some help, that
Right.
person needs some issues, or there's some things that need to be addressed. I know I have a question here in the
Mhm.
statement Brother Juan said here. He said our community has been suffering mental health issues since COVID.
Right.
We haven't recovered from being mean, nasty, dismissive from family and friends. Where is the mental health treatment from? Whoa. Now, me and you did a lot of shows during COVID,
We did.
and we know that divorce rates went up during COVID, um, because a lot of people had to deal with the reality of being around each other a little bit more. Not
Mhm.
solitude when you go to work, go to when you leave home, you go to work, you're with work friends.
Right.
A lot of parents had to deal with their kids being home. Um, and COVID, it put a lot of mental, emotional, financial strain on families because most families you need the two incomes.
Mhm.
Five. So now if you was out of work or both of y'all was out of work, now you're home. Like I said, you're home together. So like Brother Juan brings up some issues that happened during COVID, like what we went from being in the pandemic.
Mhm.
Oh, it's just open up. And it was no healing, it was no repairing.
Right.
And a lot of people, like he said, is angry. A lot of people did things with family, argued over the jab. If
Mhm.
if you didn't take the jab, I don't want you around me, so forth, so on. And we even see that in our political world. If you're
Right.
on a different party, they don't even want you to come over for Thanksgiving.
Exactly. And I mean, I really love that question because I have noticed people have got even nastier, haven't gotten meaner because they haven't took the time to really sit with themselves, and it's going back to that negative coping mechanism of they didn't do the work during COVID. And I'm talking about the workers, at least somebody may have lost a loved one because they may have died from COVID, right? They did not do the inner work of grieving properly, and that's a whole nother layer that we don't discuss, right? Of just grieving. People are dealing with complicated grief. And also, you see a lot of anger because that's inward depression. You know, when you see anger, they only function in either their sadness or their anger. They don't really tune in and say, you know what, why am I always upset? People really, I'm gonna keep it real with y'all. A lot of people do not have that self awareness they don't sit down anymore to say, what is my problem? They want to point the finger at someone else and say that person caused me the problem instead of saying, you know what, I am the problem as well because I don't sit down. We don't sit down enough. We have this thing in our hands 24/7. We don't read enough. We're not tapped into our own feelings. We're desensitized. We watch things that desensitize us. We surround ourselves by people who just like, hey, like I'm mad. Let's go outside and let's go do this. I don't even like calling the young gentlemen YNs because I know
I
because
think it's they say that.
I feel like that's so derogatory. And guess what? When we keep once again putting these labels on people, why should I even ascribe to being better? I'm going to be a YN and now we're old, what they call old unks. So I'm in the rest of the, when we talk about arrested development, I'm in arrested development. So why am I going to even take the time to even heal and break away from this label? So once again, we in this big dysfunction, and like I said, I didn't want to even be having these conversations because I'm like, who's gonna listen for real? And are you gonna do the work? Because I look at it now. If one person takes something away from us and saying, you know what, I'm gonna work on myself, because I always said to myself, and I made another commitment to myself. I said I'm gonna be the change that I want to see in my environment. I can't depend on someone else to change because once again, I cannot change anybody but myself. So why not me changing? But what I'm not gonna allow is someone who refuses to change in my life because
So you don't. So you don't think we have Black Americans have a relationship with mental health because you feel like people don't listen or they just don't. It's not important to.
I feel like it's not important to them because I think we throw around this is cute, right? Like, oh, I go to therapy, but when you don't see the actual change within that person. See, in therapy, let me keep it real with y'all. You got this thing called an intake form. You do an intake on your client. Then when you hit like that, let's say they consistent with that and that 3 month mark, that client should be able to identify change in that therapist. If not, the therapist is gonna look if it's an efficient and an effective therapist, they're gonna terminate services and say, listen, I've been working with you for 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, and I hope people are not working with folks for 20 years. For 20 years, you need to go to a psychoanalyst, and that's a whole nother topic of discussion. And you don't see any type of progress within your client, you can terminate services because you on this hamster wheel. You're constantly on the hamster wheel and what progress have you made? Like I said, change is one of the toughest things to do. And when you maintain that, think about if you want to lose weight, that's one of the toughest things. You got to get off that couch first. You got to admit, hey, I need to lose 10 pounds. Not when the doctor, put the doctor orders in. You got to admit to yourself, okay, I done got a little bit big. I done got a little bit angry. What am I going to do to change my condition? People do not want. Let me rephrase it. Many people do not want to do that. Hence, why you see people escaping from their issues.
I do believe that we it's a stigma. One of the stigmas, like you said, is peer pressure. People looking at you with the third eye, like, oh, you go to a doctor, there's something wrong with you, you cuckoo. And we see all of the symptoms. We see all of the symptoms, and then you'll always hear, "I'm working on me. I'm doing me. I'm working to be better because I don't need nobody to come in my space." This, that, and third. And then when they let somebody in their space, the person that came in their space and wreaked more havoc than they ever had prior. So was you really working on you? Like, and that's some of the things that when lives, we tend to look, like you said, outwardly
Mhm.
for the problem. When sometimes the problem is really you and um, your perception of what's happiness, your perception of what's success, um, maybe not giving yourself that gratitude, that grace that you need. I'm a big proponent of saying, like, yo, you're a black person in America and you're a black American. Do you realize how resilient you got to be able to navigate in this world? It's not,
Exactly.
it's
It's not
not easy.
easy. It's not easy at all. And so what if people, yeah, it's still a stigma in our community and people think it's a luxury. It's not. And when I love what you said about I did all this work, you gotta come hell, and then like you said, then they having these crash outs because they allowed and entertain dysfunction in their life. What work did you really do? And don't be saying somebody
That,
manipulated you.
that's one of the things, Professor Drea, is that we see it.
Hmm.
We see it in each other most of the time. I could identify, like, when a guy or a young man or even an older man, he's going through it, and you be like, "Yo, something not right with him. He's off his he off his square."
Hmm.
And like I said, we'll start seeing the symptoms, and then you start seeing the microaggressions, the crash outs, so forth and so on. Instead of saying, you know what, I know this individual, he may be somebody I could have a rapport with. Maybe I need to, you know, holler at him and put in a good word to him, like, I see you.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And sometimes too, um, like I said, we're in self preservation mode. It's okay to plant the seed into people saying, "Hey, have you thought about getting help?" But I'm not going to tell you that every day and still be standing there and you crashing out every day. How much more? How much can I take? Because now that energy is transferring onto me, which is called secondary trauma. Now I'm going to have to do double the work in my therapy sessions because I'm witnessing you having crash outs. I got to talk you down from having crash outs. That's now affecting my life because once again, you don't want to do the work and you're dumping onto me and I gotta go do double the work. So that's why I said no. I'll tell people, I'll plant the seed, I'll be kind to them, I'll love them, but I can love you from afar too if you decide to self destruct and you're not bringing me with you because you want to crash out every day. This is done gone too far. It's time to go get help. And I gave you the resources. I cannot make you drink the water. I can lead you, but I cannot make you drink the water. So it's self preservational. It's not being mean. But that's even in our training as people who's in mental health professions. We cannot do the work for our clients. And sometimes you cannot, of course, you can't save nobody, but you have to let folks go too. That's what it's called, terminating services.
Yeah. So that concludes the first of this conversation. And I know you have a lot more planned that you want to discuss and really start to peel back some of the layers of arrestive development, post-traumatic slave syndrome, being able to have those identifiers and see it and be able to navigate through that trauma. I know one time I think it was me and you had a conversation about uh, generational curses. Some people don't believe in it. Some people don't think that they're true. We need to have a discussion.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone look at, are generational curses true? Don't answer. Just think about it before you answer and do a deep dive in understanding what is a curse.
Right.
Is a curse a negative? Is a curse something that's hereditary, passed down? Um, most people break the cycle and within the generation. Some cycles within the generation. Some never break it. So
Mm-hmm.
we're gonna have this discussion and we're gonna really try to have this open, honest conversation going forward because the Black family, the Black American family is the base, the source, the beginning, the end to Black liberation. It starts and ends with the Black family.
Mm-hmm.
You destroy the Black family, you destroy any effort of Black liberation.
Absolutely.
Any final words, Drea?
No, it was a good discussion. I appreciate it, and hopefully y'all took away something. So, once again, we need collaborative help and assistance, and we need one another. So, take one takeaway, and my takeaway from everyone is spend at least 5 minutes with yourself this week, every day. You gotta do the work. You gotta see what issue that's keeping me is holding me back from where I need to go. So it could be mental health, and it's okay. Get beyond the stigma.
And with this, we're going to try to have Professor Drea on every other Wednesday.
Yes.
So not next Wednesday, the following Wednesday. I think that's the Wednesday before things. No, that ain't the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. We're going to try to have, oh yeah, it might be, but we'll figure it out.
We'll figure
Every
it out.
other Wednesday, to discuss this particular topic and really take a deep dive and really be able to have an open, honest discussion. And because the crash out makes us laugh sometimes. This is how our social media algorithm works. We
Mm-hmm.
see it on those sites on IG where somebody done crashed out, girlfriend done hit her boyfriend at the supermarket for cheating. Dude done took out the whole family because the girl don't want to be bothered with him. This is not normal behavior.
Right.
And we need to know how to be able to problem solve instead of resorting to violence, uh, trauma, extra crashing out, and so forth and so on. With that, everybody have a great night. We'll talk to
Bye,
you guys then.
everyone. Bye.
have you done for me lately? It's Coons, what have y'all done for us lately? And if there's no answer, the only thing we owe them